Hello, hello, hello. I am super excited to be back with you live. We had some technical breakdown and now we're back. Sometimes you just got to figure it out yourself. Let me tell you. All right. And so we are going to get into some things today. We had an awesome week in supervision and we were talking about quite a bit. I'm going to try to run through with you some of those topics that we discussed. And among the topics was a discussion about social anxiety. Social anxiety. And we're going to get into that. I don't want to waste much time here. Want to make sure that we get here. But we're talking about beyond worry, spotting social anxiety inside generalized anxiety disorder. Okay. So what happens is that sometimes when we are looking at disorders, it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost. And it may be one particular diagnosis that we see, but there other possible comorbid diagnoses that we are missing. And that's what we talked about. We talked about some of those things that kind of lie in between the lines. Let's go on and get right to the point, okay? Again, we're talking beyond worry, spotting social anxiety inside generalized anxiety disorder. And we started with a scenario. That was after we talked with everyone about what they had been experiencing. We jumped into a scenario here, and I'm going to pull that up so that you can see it and see if you feel that you know the answer for this particular scenario that we're going to get into. Um, and we're talking about a male client here who is reporting a few symptoms. A male client who's reporting a few symptoms of uncontrollable worry and anxiety throughout the week. So he's having uncontrollable worry and anxiety throughout the week. Do those words already sound familiar with a particular disorder, right? Uncontrollable worry and anxiety. But he's having uncontrollable worry and anxiety throughout the week. And he describes experiencing panic attacks, including one that occurred after meeting his in-laws. Anybody had a panic attack after meeting your in-laws? Woo-wee, that doesn't sound like a good start. A panic attack after finally meeting your, and that's interesting too, that he just met them and they were already met, but that's another story. Anyway, so no judgment. Including a panic attack including one that occurred after meeting his in-laws. He reports frequent alcohol use, especially in social situations, and had consumed alcohol prior to the most recent panic attack. So this is an individual who's having panic attacks on a regular basis, right? And we want to study that. And this is something that we talked about. Just because someone has frequent panic attacks, does that mean that they have a panic disorder? Yes or no, right? And so some of the answers that we have here is which diagnosis best meets the presentation? Is it A, generalized anxiety disorder, B, panic disorder, C, social anxiety disorder, or D, substance or medication induced anxiety disorder? And I'm just going to cut to the chase. In this situation, the most likely answer might be, and I'm going to tell you, it just wasn't enough information to begin with. This was a kind of a bad question, but good in a way that the idea was to help my supervisees to start having or to engage in critical thinking. Okay, into critical thinking is so important, right? Okay, and so we have to analyze different bits and pieces of a scenario and try to come up with a conclusion that is going to work for our clients, right? And so how here we have substance medication induced anxiety, and because we don't have that information, it may appear that the substance use is connected with those symptoms, because some people take use alcohol to try to pull things down, but then they end up having, pulling the anxiety down, but then they end up having adverse symptoms that can cause like a panic attack or something like that. So it really doesn't work the way that they had intended. Sometimes they're not even aware of that. Okay, and we're gonna see how that could be a possibility. But then this person has panic attacks. Okay, and so if we have panic attacks, does that mean because we have frequent panic attacks that we have a panic disorder? No, it doesn't. Panic attacks come alongside other mental health diagnoses. Um, in the case of a panic attack, one of the ways that we can distinguish if it's actually panic disorder is not just so much the frequency, but the fear of the panic attacks reoccurring, so much to the point that I'm adjusting things in my life, in my lifestyle, maybe in work, just to avoid situations that might bring about that panic attack. Okay, and so I'm making improper adjustments because of that heightened fear. All right, and so in this case, we wouldn't be looking at panic disorder. Okay, with generalized anxiety disorder, we see uncontrolled worry, and that is a tenet of generalized anxiety disorder. Um, but for this case, we're more so looking into the social anxiety disorder. Like I said, we don't have enough on frequency, intensity, and duration to make any judgment of what this situation, what this particular diagnosis should be. But we want to do some critical thinking here because this is the problem. Sometimes, let's just say in this case, we're going to switch it up as we go. Let's just say in this case that this client already had generalized anxiety disorder, right? Generalized anxiety disorder. They already had that. Sometimes what we do is that we stop paying attention to the fact that there can be other anxiety diagnoses that fall alongside the generalized anxiety disorder. Okay, so I know I chopped this up a bit, but when you do it, you do supervision. You can just do what you want, right? So I'm changing it up a bit. All right, because this is based on things that I have experienced, right? So sometimes we can look at a thing a certain type of way, but then we forget. And some of you all, when you're diagnosing, you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to just continue to add diagnosis on after I've already diagnosed this one thing, because maybe that won't be good for their record, or it doesn't look good, or I'm just treating this one thing primarily. But ethically, we have to diagnose what is there. And the facts are is that when we see that there is a diagnosis, for instance, if there's an anxiety disorder or something, we should also be looking and ruling out the potential for other anxiety diagnosis as well. And we're going to talk about the reason why. And not just that, but other potential mood diagnosis, such as mood disorder. So the reason why we wouldn't be as focused on generalized anxiety disorder, because it could appear that the frequent use of alcohol appears to precipitate or intensify anxiety symptoms in this case. But let's move on, because there's a bigger picture we want to understand here. So, as I mentioned, let's just say that this individual has generalized anxiety disorder. Social anxiety disorder, in this case, should be looked into. Is it possible that your client is less of a social drinker? Because let's just say that your client, in the description here, it's the client is saying that basically it's already been described to you that the client frequently reports alcohol use, that they're drinking quite a bit, right? And you might just think, oh, and when they talk about drinking, they're drinking in the club, they're drinking in the bar, they're drinking when they go out and have fun. And so you in your mind, this client, let's just say we switched it up and they have a general anxiety disorder. You know that they have an anxiety disorder. They're often worrying and things like that. But then you haven't diagnosed them as having a substance use disorder, but you're saying they drink quite frequently. But as you continue to analyze and evaluate the situation, you're saying, man, but you know what? As I'm asking these questions, there is a correlation with social drinking, but could it be that my client, is it possible that my client is less of a social drinker, but drinking to be social? Is that also a possibility? I'm helping us to try to read in between the lines because sometimes these things are missed. And you may be treating a client for something and you may need to be treating them for something else. Okay. And so is it possible that they may, instead of just being a social drinker, but they're drinking to be social? In other words, your client may need to feel like that they need to drink, or they may need to, yeah, that, in order to feel comfortable amongst in-laws. Scared to death about in-laws, or to feel comfortable in social environments. Okay, so they sometimes avoid social environments, but then when they are there, they're having to have a drink or a use of some type of substance in order to feel like that they're at ease. Okay, and this is often the cause of a variety of substance use conditions, is simply to reduce the anxiety that someone might be experiencing when going into certain environments. So we want to look at comorbid diagnosis, okay, to rule that out as well. So let's just say they already have generalized anxiety disorder. We may want to look into a few other things. So let's look at correlation the correlation of anxiety disorders and major depressive disorders. I was looking at this one article as I was fact checking some of my information, because you start to experience things in therapy and then you're wondering, like, man, I wonder if this is documented because I'm seeing this a lot, right? And so you look at things and it says these anxiety disorders, particularly panic, social phobia, generalized anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, these anxiety disorders and that post-traumatic stress, these want to. Okay, we're gonna go with it. I don't want to get too far off topic, but particularly with panic, social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, these anxiety disorders are frequently comorbid with major depressive disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's go on and put that in it because this is fact-based research. Okay, these anxiety disorders are frequently comorbid with major depressive disorder. As a matter of fact, 50 to 60% of individuals with major depressive disorder, okay, report a lifetime history of one or more of these anxiety disorders. So this is telling you that, hey, when I see someone just in general, and let me read some other stats. The anxiety disorders are also highly correlated with one another, and approximately, check this out, 1/4 to 1/2 of individuals with each of the anxiety disorders report a lifetime history of an alcohol or substance use disorder. So now we're seeing not just a correlation of comorbid anxiety disorders. Okay, we're seeing a correlation of not of anxiety disorders as well as substance use disorders. Okay, and so sometimes there's other things we need to be treated. Sometimes our clients are not even telling us that, hey, you know what, I have this too. A lot of times they're having anxiety and then they tell you, hey, I smoke or I drink or whatever, this and that. Sometimes it's to remove those symptoms, and we have to be mindful of that as clinicians. Anxiety disorders, check this out, I love this, check this out, this is really important. When you're thinking about an anxiety disorder, they rarely exist in isolation. So even if there was to be an audit of you diagnosing an anxiety disorder, it may look odd to someone who really knows about what's really going on that you don't also have another anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder. We'll talk about that in a second. Anxiety disorders rarely exist in isolation, with several studies reporting that over 90% of individuals with anxiety disorders have a lifetime history of other psychiatric problems. So they rarely exist on their own. This is an important one too. Overall, more than 75% of patients diagnosed with depression in a primary, this is just in a primary care setting, suffer from an anxiety disorder. Okay. And I have the references for these. So it's important to understand that these disorders, anxiety disorder, it doesn't function alone. Perhaps a client that we're talking about is drinking, not because they're just so socially drinking, but because they're trying to remove anxiety, and there is some type of anxiety disorder. We need to know what an anxiety disorder is, just even move to the next step, but we can't go through all that today. So what is the number one fear of someone who has anxiety disorder? This is something I asked the supervisees. What's the number one fear of someone who has social anxiety disorder? Well, the number one fear of someone who has social anxiety disorder is, guess what? Scrutiny, according to the DSM. They have an elevated, an enhanced fear of being criticized, of feeling judged, according to the DSM. And these fears also attach to a fear of sometimes disapproval, because if I'm having a fear of being judged, let's just say part of my social anxiety disorder is a fear of getting up talking in front of people. Okay. And I've had that fear. I got to do something tonight. And so, really what it is that you're fearing disapproval. You're fearing whether or not they'll like you. Now I got to move on. Acceptance, being judged. And I haven't gotten to this, but I'm seeing this across the board in practice. I believe it also connects intuitively with people pleasing behaviors, because you're immensely afraid of scrutiny. So much to the point that if it's impacting your social, occupational, interpersonal concerns, right? And so this is when we see extremes. What is somebody thinking about? And I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to show you the reason why someone who has an anxiety disorder might want to have a drink, or might have a panic attack or something of that nature, because of these loaded fears. Let me just see if it'll pop up.
What do you think she...
I just want to show the full thing. Okay, so let me stop the screen, stop the share here, and I'm going to share it again. And this is a 1-minute video, and I love it. It's by a gentleman who goes by on YouTube, Julian himself. And let's see what it looks like when someone might, and I don't know that she has social anxiety disorder, but is having anxiety about environment. Let's
What
go.
do you think she is thinking of you? Try to guess.
That I'm dumb. I don't know.
Whoa. Are you thinking she's dumb?
Sure. No.
What were you thinking?
She has a pretty Brazilian look.
Interesting.
Hold on.
What do you think him with the cat is thinking of you?
I think he likes me.
I think you should be in tune 3. I think you look a little bit like a Zendaya.
What do you think her with her hand on her chest is thinking of you?
That, I don't know, I'm awkward.
What were you thinking of her?
I like your earrings.
Interesting, huh?
Perfect.
What do you think he's thinking of you?
He's judging me on my looks.
What were you thinking of her?
I'm actually triggered myself. I'm in my own head.
He wasn't even thinking of you at all. So this example here, by the way, it just shows how there's the narrative going on, and then there's reality. Stories, facts. You're being gaslit inside, and it's always going to the negative, to the negative, to the negative. But it's not reality.
All right, this is beautiful, beautiful. I love this. I love this. I love talking about these various concerns with my supervisees. We're about at time though. But yeah, so in this situation, we see that there's a narrative that she has established in her mind, and it's about her looks. So this is you know, who she's thinking that they're thinking this about her, but who's really thinking this? This is a thought that she has of her own about herself. This is not about everybody else. This is about what you think about you. And that's the goal for us to help our clients to understand, is that this is really somehow this was developed, okay, to where you have these insecure feelings about being judged, about being awkward, about not being attractive. And it could be, if you're walking into a room and everybody that you look at, you're thinking that they're thinking a certain type of way about you. Yeah, I would want to take something too. Okay. Now it's important for us to understand as well. And we gave this multiple choice question. We're gonna wrap it up. Okay. Multiple choice is social anxiety disorder is marked by a fear of anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others in A, social interactions, B, being observed, C, performing in front of others, or all of the above. What do you think the answer is? A, B, C, or D? Well, the answer here is D, all of the above. Social anxiety doesn't just involve maybe having fears about public speaking or being up in front of people or going to a party, right? It also involves fear of being observed, fear of also like being observed might be this is real life, this is in the DSM. Fear of somebody looking at you while you're eating. That's part of it. Fear of being observed. That's an example. Okay. And so these are things that surround an insecurity that our clients have, and we have to use that CBT to help to bring that home, and so that it is no longer a great concern for your client. We have to help them to bring that home, right? And so this is the exciting thing about doing what we do, right? This is the exciting thing about doing what we do because we get the opportunity to be the person to influence our supervisees and our clients about another way. All right. I want to inform you all about something that we have coming up that's very special that I didn't want to miss, that I always miss. All right. And here we have a supervisor, not a supervisor training, but if you're looking for CEUs for supervision, you're a supervisor and you're looking for those three CEUs that's required if you are a supervisor. Come and check us out. We have a live training on December 5th, 2025. Check us out. And then we have our other trainings that will list links to them, but we want to bring special attention to this. And we will be I think we have a scheduled training coming up. We haven't gotten the marketing out for next month. Well, I appreciate you all tuning in today. I'm excited to be back and excited to get with you on next week. We'll touch base again. You all take care and have a blessed weekend. All right. Bye.